documentation for Hyperflex. We have code samples and scripts for Python, for PowerShell, there's probably just some straight up XML with curl in there. There's also some for UCS Director. There's those code samples, but then we also have, on developer.cisco.com, we have something called Code Exchange. If you go to Code Exchange, you can pull up code for UCS just by putting in a keyword to search for that. In fact, I'll go there real quick. Search for UCS. And what these are links to repos that have something to do with UCS, whether it's UCSM SDK or UCSM Ansible or Kubernetes, UCS, bare metal, I think that's what that stands for. Bare metal OS installer for UCS. Intersight Python, UCS config, Easy UCS. That's a pretty cool one that I was just introduced to by the developer. Easy UCS is a really cool way to do some UCS deployment. And I think it's worth checking out any one of these repos, whether I wrote it or someone else wrote it. In fact, I have a session at 1 o'clock today to go over the Intersight API. It's a workshop. You'll come, you'll run some calls via Postman as well as Python against the Intersight platform, and you'll get your results back, and you'll feel super happy about doing that. But we also have a workshop tomorrow or later today at 5 o'clock on UCS Power Tool. The code that I run or I utilize in those sessions are here in Code Exchange. You click on that, and then you can see it in the GitHub repo. You can see the various examples that we have. Just a very simple one, how to connect to UCS Manager. And that's under my code. That's under my GitHub repo. My user ID is moving a lot. And I'm pretty active, fairly active contributor. So I'm not super active, but fairly active. And I have a lot of things out there for UCS Manager. I actually have one here, if you're interested, on how to use your Amazon Echo to manage your data center. Anybody ever see my my YouTube video you've seen it, okay. It's old now, but I thought it was kind of cool. The premise is I'm sitting at home and it's my day off. I don't know why it'd be a day off other than a Saturday or Sunday, but it's my day off and my phone rings and says, oh, you need the serial number? I don't have my laptop, so let me get that information for you. And I ask my Echo what the serial number is on my server, and it reads it back to me. And it's not fake, it's totally real. And then further on in the video, I ask Alexa to provision a server for me in UCS Manager, and it's real, you've seen it. I would go check it out on YouTube. It's UCS Alexa, but the code for it is here if you're interested in using voice to manage your data center. All right, so enough of a diversion on that one. Object model reference here on developer.cisco.com. If you're interested in the compute blade object, find it in the left-hand side, the object that you're interested in, and bring up the object model information. On the right-hand side, it tells you a bunch of information, what the properties are or what the privileges are required to access this object. It's SNMP-OID if you are still using stuff like that. How it's named, what contains it, and what it contains, the faults associated with it. There's a lot of information out here related to the object and how that object fits in the object model and what that object model rules are associated with that object. But if I just look at the property summary, and I'm going to scroll to something. Now, if you were in my last session, it's not going to be a super big surprise, but because I used the same one. I'm going to scroll to the description. On a compute blade, pretty much the only thing you can set is the user label and the description on the compute blade. Say something about the blade, what maybe it's for, and then a user label you can use in UCS Manager. You can have it appear next to the blade name itself. Those are really the only two things that you can set. But if you were using or writing some code that accepted parameters to put those to update those attributes on a compute blade, how do you validate that that information that somebody is entering is correct? Well, if I look at the object model, I can see that for a description, it can be 0 to 256 characters long, and it would match this regular expression, or it has to match that regular expression. So the object model documentation doesn't just tell you the hierarchy, it tells you every attribute and the values that that attribute can support. If this was a pattern, perhaps, or this is a pattern, so the pattern that your text would have to match to be valid, but say it was the ID for a VLAN, it would show you the ranges that that ID would have to fall in to be supported or to be valid for that object. For Intersight, we have object model documentation as well. Just a second to log in again. Okay. Double super secret login. And I'm in. Okay. So that's probably the best part of the talk. When that guy, on your responses, when that guy did the login on Intersight, it was so fascinating. All right, so I select my my Intersight deployment that I have, devices I've claimed. I actually don't have to log in to look at the API documentation, but I do have to log in if I want to use the API browser. You can get to the help from the home screen or the homepage for Intersight, or once you're in Intersight, you can just click on the question mark and go to Get More Help on Cisco Intersight. If I go here, at the bottom of this page is API documentation. All that other stuff there, I never looked at that. You don't need to know that stuff. But no, it's all good for Intersight documentation, et cetera. But the REST API is documented very, very, very well. In fact, and I did talk about this at other sessions, the query syntax portion of this documentation is so good and so thorough and so interesting and so important that there will be, I bet, questions about this on the DC Auto Specialist or the DC Auto Professional exam for DevNet. So if you are interested in doing that exam, I would recommend highly that you understand Intersight query syntax because there are questions most likely about that on the exam. So you have the documentation, talks about how we do error handling, query syntax, what the supported HTTP methods are, the authentication methodology that we utilize, and that's all in the documentation there. The API reference has the object model. Just like UCS Manager had the object model documentation, this is the object model for Cisco's Intersight. It'll show you the schema. So if I'm looking at this AAA audit record here, it shows me the attributes and their types and what can go in that object. If I actually want to do something, like a query, search for compute. So there's this thing called compute physical summary. Compute physical summary allows me to query all the compute devices I have attached to Intersight, physical summaries of all the compute devices that I have attached to Intersight. So here I see when I look at this, I can do a get on all the devices. If I just click that send button, it runs that REST request. It uses my authentication through the browser, the browser session cookies that I have, and it brings back the JSON associated or that represent those objects. If I was interested in just a single object, I can grab its MOID, which in Intersight is the unique unambiguous identifier for that object. We do support DNs. Objects do have DNs, but if you want the unique identifier, it's the managed object ID. And if I want to query just by that managed object ID, I could go to the other get operation here, put the MOID in, and click send. And that information, let me scroll down a little bit. There we go. It just brings back that single compute summary. So there's a lot of information here, and the thing I said earlier about the engine of application state, or hypermedia is the engine of application state, what you see here is that this object is also linked to, or has a reference to a permissions object. That permissions object has a link associated with it. This is that hypermedia as the engine of application state. We're just linking to another object, or we're referencing another object via its link in the object's attributes. Say I'm interested in NTP. NTP policy. Get all the NTP policies, and I think I didn't create one. Dang it. Well, let's create one. I'm going to go grab an NTP body. That's the JSON for creating an NTP body. I'm just going to copy that. And I'm going to go back to my Intersight. And if I want to create one, I go to /API/v1/NTP/policies, put my body in there. So this is going to create an NTP object named NTP-policy with a description of NTP policy for ntp.org and with a single NTP server. I click send. There's an error. What error? It looks good to me. An internal error. Permissions error? I don't think so. Well, live demo. I swear it works. Let's try it like that. No, okay. I'll show it to you in Postman. I swear that works. You can do object creation through the REST API browser, just not right today, not right at this minute. What's that? No, so because when I did the get, so you came back with nothing. I don't have any results. I don't have any objects in there. I'll figure it out. But I don't want to waste time figuring it out right now. All right, so these are the developer tools that we have available. Oh, the other thing I didn't show you was the object model documentation, or the object browser in UCS. This is Visore. Every UCS system, whether it's central, manager, or the standalone rack units, have Visore. You go to the IP address of that entity /visore.html, and it will bring up this object browser. What the object browser allows you to do is to put in a class ID, like Compute Blade. And it'll bring back all the Compute Blade objects on the system. If you wanted to see the query that was utilized to pick up or bring back all those objects, you can click on that link that says Display XML of last query, and that'll show you what was sent to UCS Manager to bring that data back. Well, you might say, well, John, how do I know what the object is, or the class ID is of the object that I want to retrieve? Well, so here's a UCS system. And if I'm interested in compute blades or maybe service profiles and I want to get them back, but I don't know what the class ID is for a service profile, how do I find that out? Where's the information for that? Well, if you go to UCS Manager and you right-click on a service profile and click Copy XML, it'll pop up a window of the XML that is utilized, or that is the representation of that object in the object model. And if you scroll to the top of that, oh, I clicked on the wrong thing, I apologize. I meant to click on the service profile. If I click on the service profile, copy XML, go to the very top, the very first entity in that XML, the XML element, it's kind of hard to see perhaps, it's LS server, lowercase l, lowercase s, uppercase S server. That's the class ID for that object. You can go to anything within UCS Manager, right-click on it, and in that context menu, get that copy XML, and that will show you the class ID. Now that class ID, you can go ahead and put that in to Visore. It'll bring you back all the service profiles on the system And again, you can look at the query. But if you want to look at the objects and the attributes associated with those service profiles, you can do that here. If you click on the left or right facing green arrows, it will either drop you into the object or it'll go back up the tree to the object that it came from. So you can see that I dropped in here and I can see the VCon assignments. There's just a slew of children objects that are associated with it. And children objects can have children objects, like the network control policy name. You can right-click on, or you can click on the right-facing or left-facing arrows. Now, Visori is not super intelligent. If it sees a slash in the name, it thinks that there might be something underneath or might be something above it. It is possible that you'll click one of these right-facing arrows and you'll get to a point where there's no more objects. Visori thought there might be an object underneath it because there was a slash in the name, but in this case there wasn't. And then if you go back up the tree, you go back to the parent of the object that you came from. But this is a good way to get an awareness or understanding of the object model. Now I'm going to show you a tool in PowerShell. It also exists in Python, but it's very simple to use in PowerShell to get you all the information you need out of the object model, because I said it was built into the library itself. So let's go to the next one, SDKs. Python and PowerShell and the future. Not much to say about the future at the moment. Maybe some Terraform provider, maybe a Go provider or Go SDK for Intersight. For UCS Manager, it's Python and it's PowerShell or it's straight up XML. Whatever one you want to use, that's what we have available. For Intersight, right now we have the Python SDK. They're redoing the PowerShell SDK. It was up on Intersight.com as a download. It's no longer there. It's being reworked, re-engineered. The Python SDK, it's okay, right? You know, SDKs provide you things like session management and object management, things like that. For now, I would recommend that if you're going to program against Intersight, just do it like it's straight up REST. Use the requests library and do your interaction with Intersight via the REST URL that you have. The SDK, it's actually you know, with a cloud service, a thing that can be updated all the time, right? To have an SDK that's constantly up to date is going to be, I think, it's not going to be the most easy thing to support. So if you look at programming against Intersight by just using the URLs, I think that's the best bet. At least that's what I would say for now. But when we get to that, I'll talk a little bit more about that. So with UCS SDKs, whether it's Python or PowerShell, they're generated for the most part. 99 or 98 or 97% of the commandlets or the Python modules or classes, I should say, are generated. And that generated code is done by taking the schema, passing it into this generator, and pumping out either the Python code or the PowerShell commandlets. Now for PowerShell, the latest release came out last week, 2.5.3.0, I think it is, and it is chock full of commandlets, about 5,700 commandlets, or a little bit more than 5,700, 5,700 commandlets. It's a lot. But you might be thinking, well, how do I know what commandlet to use? I'm going to show you something called Get UCS Commandlet Meta, and that is going to show you how to look at the object model and know what commandlet to use for what object. You can also generate code with UCS Power Tool and the Python SDK. But the point is that both of these libraries are generated code for the most part, and there's a few commandlets and there's a few utilities with Python that are hand-coded or engineered because they have special functionality. And we'll get to that in just a moment. So UCS Power Tool. You used to be able to download it from Cisco.com, double-click it, and install it. This is no more. We don't do this anymore. It's still out there on Cisco.com, but that version 2.5.1.6 is from January a year ago. The newer version, 2.5.3.0, is actually just out last week, and you use install module to install it on your system. Install module, and then the module name, cisco.ucsmanager.ucscentral.imc, are .desired state configuration. Those are the 4 modules that you would install. Cisco.ucs.core, that module gets installed automatically. So that name core is a little bit of a misnomer, and I don't want to throw you, so I'm going to talk about that in just a second, what that means. But when you install these modules, they pull them down from the internet, just like using pip install with Python stuff. This is import or install module, and it pulls it down from PowerShell gallery. And you install it. You get all these commandlets with it. 5,716 commandlets are included in the latest version. When you want to use the module, you don't double-click the icon for UCS Power Tool or UCS Central or Cisco IMC. You import the module, you give the module a name, and now those commandlets are available to you in PowerShell. This is for Windows. With Power Tool, UCS Power Tool on Windows, you use install module and import module to utilize the commandlets in those libraries. For Linux, Mac OS, CentOS, and other variants of Linux, if that variant of Linux supports PowerShell Core, you can run UCS Power Tool Core. Power Tool Core is the Linux version, or the Linux-capable version of UCS Power Tool. It is the exact same functionality, minus a commandlet or two that supports windowing and other things that aren't, and other features that aren't available on Linux. But for the most part, you have the same amount of commandlets, 5,706 versus 5,716. The thing that is common in both these distributions is this Cisco.ucs.core. That core is not PowerShell core. That .core module is commandlets that are core to UCS Power Tool that are shared by the other 3 libraries, or the other 4 libraries in the case of Windows with desired state configuration. So if you go and install Power Tool Core for your Linux system, whether it's Mac or CentOS or some other variant, that core module is core to Power Tool, not PowerShell core. We get questions on the mailer, and they're like, I installed the UCS core, it's not working. Well, you need more than just that, and that's not, you don't do an install module. You can do it on Linux, but if you do it, you're going to get the Windows version of the module on your Linux system, and you don't want that. So the way you install this, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to go that far. The way you install Power Tool Core is to download it from community.cisco.com. So if you go to community.cisco.com, search for UCS Power Tool Core, find the latest entry that comes back in that search, download the zip file from that page, take a look at the PDF for installation. It's basically just unzipping it in your home directory in the PowerShell. After you've installed PowerShell Core, you do need that before you install Power Tool Core. But you just unzip it, and the libraries are available for you to go ahead and then import and utilize. And you can start it like this. You can say pwsh-no-exit-file and give a path to the start UCS Power Tool.ps1. That will load all the modules. That will do all the imports. Or you could just say import module once you're inside PowerShell Core in your system. Import module Cisco.ucs Manager, Cisco.ucs Central. I have an example right here. See if I can make this a little bit bigger. Okay. Clear. Sorry. So if I'm in just my Linux system and I've already installed PowerShell Core, I type pwsh. Now I'm in PowerShell on my Linux machine, or my Mac. And I change my prompt. My prompt's moving a lot. If you go to GitHub, it's github.com/moving-a-lot. That's my GitHub ID. That's where I put all my code. But I change my prompt, and I say, if I was to say connect UCS, the term connect UCS is not recognized as the name of a commandlet, because I need to import that module. I've already done the installation on Linux by unzipping, or on Mac by unzipping the file from community.cisco.com. I say import module, Cisco. And I think this will work, that if I don't know, I hit tab, tab. If I don't know what module I have, hit tab, tab. And modules that match for import module, it'll show me the ones that I have on my system. If I install Cisco UCS Manager, now, if I say connect UCS, it says, well, what UCS do you want to connect to? And that is 128.7.2. I think that was right. Yay. So I connected to this UCS Manager with PowerShell. I have slides for all this, but I thought it'd be better just to show you how it works. I've connected. I get back the session information. I get back the token. I get back the name of the system I'm connected to, the version that it is. I'm actually using, this is a NATed IP that I have for it. So that's actually back in my DMZ, the 10.200.0.5. That's its actual IP address. You can see that it has this attribute called no SSL false. That means it's SSL. It's just a, by saying that no SSL is false, it means that I am SSL. So, but that's my session information. And now I can do things like get UCS Blade. And all the object information for UCS blades in my system scrolls by. Right? If I'm interested in just getting a particular piece of information out of UCS Blade, I can pipe that object down the pipeline in PowerShell to a PowerShell commandlet called select-object. Now, the select-object allows me to see particular attributes that are in that object that's coming down the pipeline. And when I use select-object, I can use select-object, or I can use the PowerShell shorthand of just select. Say I want the distinguished name. I can put that out there. But now I'm interested in the serial number. I'm not quite sure what attribute is the serial, or the serial number. Is it serial? No. Is it just serial? What could it be? So I can just type like SCR and hit tab, and it'll show me, oh, it could be serial or it could be server ID. Well, I want serial. The point is, the commandlets are context aware. Total memory. Well, total memory only had one option. That's why I just popped right up. It didn't give me what the two might be. I hit enter, and I get back my DN, my serial, my total memory. It's very simple, straightforward process, right? I logged in. I did a query. But you see what I did was I took the objects that came back and I passed them down the pipeline. And the select object commandlet said, oh, these are things that you want me to look at and pull out the DN, the serial, or the total memory. Sure, I could do that. Any of the commandlets in PowerTool give you back objects. And those objects can be passed down the pipeline. One of the reasons PowerShell is so cool, again, servers are cool, PowerShell is cool. One of the reasons I like it so much is that it's a CLI, but it's an object-based CLI. I get objects back, and I can do something with that object. I can pass it down the pipeline. I'm sorry, say that again? Yes. So the question is, can you use the commandlet to select properties to select specific parts of that? So here's what you would do. If I want to know how a commandlet works, I can type get help and then get compute blade, or UCS blade. The help will show me all those attributes that I can use to target the thing that I want to pull back. The first time you run help, it's got to load, so give it a second here. So all these attributes of a blade can be used to pull that blade or a specific entity back, or ones that match that specific thing, like ones that have maybe a value that's common among different blades, like perhaps a amount of memory. Like if I looked at Let's see what. Do I have any that have the same? All right, so I have a couple blades that have 131072 for their total memory. So I could have done something like this. What was it, 72? 072? So it filtered on that. Right? Does that answer your question? So there's many ways to do things. In fact, I have in my slides here examples of how to connect, how to query by a class name, how to query by a DN, or any other attribute related to that blade. In fact, you can filter in a number of ways, and this is something I should point out for UCS Power Tool. Power Tool is case sensitive, meaning that if I ask for a model like UCSB B200M4, it has to match the tag or the model number exactly what's in the object model. So that top one will bring back values to me. The bottom one, or on the second line, on line 4, with a lowercase UCSB, won't match anything because Power Tool is matching against the values in the object model. PowerShell is case insensitive. So if I pipe objects down the pipeline, like on number 7, get blade, and where the model is equal to that, UCSB B200M4, select object DN serial model, that will match all my blades because PowerShell is matching a text against a text, and Windows, or PowerShell on Windows and on Linux, is case insensitive. So case sensitive via looking at the object model, case insensitive if I'm letting PowerShell do the decision for me. And then if I want to, I can, with my command, let's specify -filter, and say model-like for case sensitive, or -I like for case insensitive filtering, and then I can pump it out the same way. So all those examples there, those 5 different get UCS blades, are all doing some kind of filtering in different ways, utilizing either Windows, the object model, or against the object model, but using a regular expression within the query to determine what blade fits that. So some configuration. If I want to configure something with Power Tool, let me find where I went here. If I want to configure something with Power Tool, similarly, it's the object. I need to understand where to put that object in the object model. And once I know where to put it in the object model, then I know how to create it. And if I know how to create it, I can create that object within UCS Power Tool. So for example, a VLAN. VLANs live under the UCS LAN cloud. So if I get the UCS LAN cloud, I get an object back. That object is the LAN cloud where VLANs go for Ethernet VLANs. This is where they go in the object model. So I need to tell add VLAN, add UCS VLAN, where that object goes. And because I'm sending the object down the pipeline, I don't have to specify in add UCS VLAN that it goes in the LAN cloud. I'm sending the LAN cloud object down the pipeline. So all I have to put here is the name of the VLAN I want to create. I already created one called John earlier today, so I'm going to create John 01 with an ID of, I did 600 before, I'll do 660. Creates my VLAN and brings back the object of the VLAN that I just created. Now, what's nice about this is that with PowerShell, I just take an object, pass it down the pipeline. If that object can have a child object associated with it, I can pass it down the pipeline. I can just keep passing things down the pipeline. That's PowerShell. With Python, let me get to the Python stuff. Oh, before I move to the Python stuff, let me just say this. We can, with Power Tool and Python, generate code from the graphical interface operations. I can capture the log file, I can take that code that was captured, and I can generate code from it, whether it be Python or PowerShell. Let's see if I can make that work. Let's go to LANs. And I use VLAN because it's a simple object, but at the same time, that's not what I want. It's a simple object, the VLANs that I can create, they're tiny, so it's an easy way to consume it. And so the way you do this is you turn on log capture by, on a Mac, it's Control-Option-Shift-Q. Control-Shift-Q. It's kind of hard to see. In the upper bar, the black bar, it said Record XML popped up. Can you see that? Record XML popped up. It's in blue on black. Great design choice. If I click it, Record XML, it changes to Stop XML Recording. Now, if I go ahead and do something like create a VLAN, and we'll call this John 02, or 03, 02. And that's VLAN 670. The VLAN was created. There it is right there, VLAN 670. Now, if I take that VLAN and I change it from sharing type, now I'm not a network guy, so I don't know what I'm doing, if I'm doing something right or wrong here. I'm going to change that sharing type from none to primary. I'm going to save those changes. So I did an add and I did an update. All right? Stop recording XML. What do I want to call this? I'll call it VLAN ops. It downloads to where my downloads go on this Windows system. And I open up PowerShell. I import module Cisco.UCS manager. And I don't need to be connected, I don't think, but we'll see what happens. So if I say convert to UCS commandlet dash XML. I'm giving it the XML that I got in the log, and then the path, C users, Cisco, downloads, VLAN ops. That's the PowerShell code to create a VLAN and update a VLAN. You get the LAN cloud. You know that that's right because I just showed it to you, right? You get the LAN cloud, you pipe the object down the pipeline, and you send it to add UCS VLAN. Now, the graphical interface information has all the fields in it that were being utilized. But you can see the fields that I only used before were the name and the ID. But here, it's pulling out these other ones. And they might be blank. It's just what they have in there. But you only need the name and the ID. These other ones are actually defaulting to default values. How would you know what the default value for an attribute is in a UCS Manager object? How would you know? You'd look at the object model. It would tell you what the default value would be. So when I want to update that VLAN, I can do one of two things. I can set UCS VLAN, or I can add UCS VLAN, modify present. Add UCS VLAN modified present takes the VLAN that already exists and it updates it. Add UCS VLAN without modify present, if I tried to do that, would error out and say this VLAN already exists. So I typically, when I write code for UCS in PowerShell, I always use the add commandlet with whatever object that I'm working against and the modify present, because the modify present will update what already exists. One other thing on PowerShell before we move on to Python is get UCS commandlet meta. Get UCS commandlet metadata. Remember, we looked at the object model, and I use this for both Python programming and UCS programming. When you look at the object model, there's a lot of data in there. There's containment, there's attributes, there's values for those attributes. There's a lot of information. UCS commandlet meta, and let's look again just at UCS VLAN. And I can say VLAN, or I could say UCS VLAN. It brings back some information about that object type. Its class ID, what its noun is, what verbs can be used against it, get, add, set, and remove. That information comes back. But there's an object there called mo-meta. Now, mo-meta is it's more information about the managed object metadata. So I'm just going to say $meta equals that. $meta, well, it's the same thing we saw before. But now if I dip into it by looking at mo-meta, or managed object meta, there's a little bit more information. There's the class ID, there's the XML tag, there's the relative name, the version it first appeared in, its child class IDs, access privileges, and property meta. Now, property meta is interesting, because property meta is metadata about all the properties. And property meta, for, just because I happen to know this, for property number 10 is the ID of a VLAN. So property number 10, ID for a VLAN, has metadata associated with it. And that metadata is in the restriction object underneath the property object. And the restriction object for an ID for a fabric VLAN in the UCS object model is the ID can be 1 to 4042 or 4048 to 4093. Okay, that's pretty cool, I guess. But John, what's the big deal about that? Well, the big deal is this. And I'll make this a little bit bigger, hopefully. I don't like that. Here's the big deal. Oh. How do I make it bigger? It's probably big enough, right? Okay, so here's the big deal. In my PowerShell script, I'm going to create a VLAN. I'm creating that VLAN, and that VLAN has all these attributes that I can set. I'm taking some properties from parameters in to my script, a name and an ID. I want to make sure that that name and ID are valid with respect to the object model. So what do? I get the object model information. I take that object model information, and I utilize that object model information in my parameter validation, and I say if the parameter matches the regular expression that came back for a name from my metadata, well, then I'll go ahead in my code. If the ID that was sent in for this VLAN matches or is in that list of values, I create a list of 1 to 4042 and then 4048 to 4090, whatever it was. If the ID that was sent through is in that list, then that ID that's sent through is valid as far as the object model is concerned. This is dynamic validation of these parameters that were passed in based on the object model. And you all should be like, that's amazing. Why is that amazing? Because if the object model changes, if in the future VLAN names can be 64 characters long, is my code broken? No, it's not. It knows because it's looking at the object model. So my code doesn't have a 32 in here to say, oh, that's how long a VLAN name can be, or a range is set in here and saying this is the only place it can have this range. It knows based on that information, based on the object model. All right. I can get crazy deep into it, but I don't want to do that. The Python SDK works very similar to PowerShell. The Python SDK is based on the object model. You can download it from GitHub, or you can do a pip install. On GitHub, you can see basically what's the most important to Cisco, UCSM SDK, the second most important, the IMC SDK, the third most important, the UCS Central SDK. I'm not saying that that's totally true, but we see for UCS Manager, we have source samples and documentation. And then, of course, for UCS Central, there's just source. How do you install UCS Manager SDK in Python 2.7 or Python 3? Unless you need to, I would just go right. Unless you need Python 2, I would go right to Python 3. Pip install UCSM SDK, UCSC SDK, or IMC SDK to get those SDKs into your environment. If you want the latest and greatest, you can do a git clone. You could do a cd into that directory and do sudo make install, and it will create that version of the SDK in your environment. If you get the latest one, what else do you get that's latest? Defects. You also get the latest defects. So if you want to take the repo right down and put it into your system, you can do that, but you might get the latest defects as well. I have a lot of samples in here on how to do the same things that you do in UCS PowerTool, how to connect, filter, how to process the returns that you get back. You get back, in UCS PowerShell or PowerTool, you get back objects, or you get back a list of objects. In UCS Python SDK, you get back an object, a list of objects, a dictionary of a list of objects, or a dictionary of object, DN, and then that object values. So depending on what queries you use in Python, you're going to get back different return types based on what the objects are that you're looking at. A configuration script, this is how you make a VLAN. How do you make a VLAN in Python? Well, the first thing you do is find out where the LAN cloud is. On line number 10, fabric LAN cloud equals handle.query class ID fabric LAN cloud. There's only one LAN cloud. So when I make my VLAN on line number 11, I instantiate a fabric VLAN object. I say that the parent of this object that I'm creating is the LAN cloud. So the return, it's a list that I got back. So it's the return value, and it's the entity at position number 0 in the list. That's my VLAN object that I'm instantiating with that name and ID. And then I take that and I add it to the handle, my login methodology to log into the UCS manager. I add that object to the handle, and then I commit that handle. And when I do that commit, my object gets created. When you work with the Python SDK, you have to understand the object model a little bit more closely than you would with UCS PowerShell or UCS PowerTool. But I do use PowerTool to inspect the metadata, the object model hierarchy, and to be able to understand what's in there. So even when I'm programming in Python, I might use PowerTool to look at that object model as well. To create a BIOS profile, this is a very small BIOS profile. It has 3 things I'm setting: the quiet boot, resume on AC power loss, and console redirection. If I want to create that object, I have to instantiate a UCS handle to log in, make a connection to UCS Manager. Then I have to import the classes for the objects that I want to create that are part of a BIOS profile. Well, of course, this is the BIOS profile object. I have to bring that in and instantiate one of those. And then these children objects that go under the BIOS profile, I have to bring those in. My Python module has to know how to create or instantiate that object that is part of the BIOS profile. So I have to import these classes. Basically, they're recipes for how to make these objects. So I connect to UCS Manager by creating a handle and doing a handle.login. That handle.login is calling the member method of the UCS handle object that I instantiated, the member method called login. It logs me in. Everything I do in Python SDK is through the handle. So now that I have a handle and I'm logged into UCS Manager, I start creating objects. I guess I could create the object first and then create my handle, log in, and commit it. Either way, it works. So I have a handle. I create my top-level object. The top-level object is the BIOS policy. I give it a name, MO BIOS policy. I'm just instantiating this object. When I create the children objects that belong to this parent or top-level object, I reference the parent object that they belong to. So I'm instantiating these objects and saying these all go together. I create these children objects and tell them who their parent object is, and then I take the parent object, because it's aware of all the children, they're all grouped together. I take the parent object, I add it to my handle, and you saw this modify present before. It was in PowerShell, modify present. It's also in Python. I can update something that already exists, or I can instantiate it or create it if it doesn't exist yet. Modify present, add and modify present, that is the way to go when you're programming against UCS Manager with the Python SDK or PowerTool. And then I say handle.commit, again calling a member method of the handle object that I instantiated to commit those changes to UCS Manager. So, Python, PowerShell, these are the 2 ways to interact with UCS Manager. You understand the object model. Well, hopefully you understand that you need to understand the object model. Python and PowerShell are the way to manipulate that object model. And a lot of examples, again, in the slides. How do you generate code in Python? The same way you did in PowerShell. You capture the log of the operations you're doing. You load a utility function called connect to use. You load the module called USM SDK utils convert to Python, import the function called convert to UCS Python, and then you process that file, and in your Python session, you will get the Python code to create what you want to via Python. So we kind of did that at the same time there. Python with Intersight. Now we're going to talk a little bit about Intersight. I know we only got a few minutes left, but I'll pack as much in as I can. Python with Intersight. With Intersight, there is the Python SDK, as I said, but I really think that you should utilize the, just the REST interface directly. I wrote a repo. It's at Moving a Lot. It's Intersight-REST API. There's two things in that repo. There's a Postman collection, and there's a Python collection. Now, the Python collection is really just two files. It's the auth object, and then it's a file with some example operations. If you're interested in how those operations run, or I shouldn't say interested in how they run, but if you want to actually do them, a half hour, or at 1 o'clock, I'm running a workshop in the DevNet zone, and we go through this stuff. You can sit down one at the laptops and go through the process with me. But you create an auth object. Intersight signs requests, or it needs signed requests. So you have to have this auth object that takes the request, creates a SHA-256 hash to the body, signs the request, and then wraps it up using your key ID and your secret key, and sends that to Intersight. That's how you create this request. So in Python, you have to have this auth object created, and then when you call your Python code, it's going to take, or when your Python code makes that REST API call, it's going to sign the request and send it up to Intersight. Intersight's going to validate based on the API key ID, unencrypt, and then run your request. So with the Python code, and I don't think I have, see if I have an example of that. I'm just going to go ahead and clone it. So if you want the code, this is what you would do. github.com/movingalot/Intersight -REST -API. And what you get in that is a Postman collection, as well as this auth code and a little script on how to do some firmware with Intersight. Let me open that up. So as mentioned, the Intersight auth is a class that creates an auth object that you use to interact with Intersight. It's how you sign your request. Intersight ops is a file that I've created that just has some example operations and how to do a REST API call just using JSON and the requests library. You can do it that way. Or that's the way I would recommend right now. And it takes you through some getting the compute physical summaries, creating some NTP policies, updating those NTP policies. That's just a list of operations. And then in this operations code, I take you through how you would do a get, how you would do a post, how you would do a patch. So if you're interested in programming against Intersight, definitely get this repo because it'll show you how to go through these operations. Now, the Postman collection that I have out there for Intersight has a lot of functionality in it. It has that body that didn't work before, but compute physical summaries, I click send on that one. It goes out to that URL. It's using the GET request. It brings back the JSON body of the response. If I want to create an NTP policy, actually, if I run this GET, it should come back with something. Not what I expected. Actually, let's go ahead and delete that. Delete that. And then do a GET. Well, that model, or that MOID was deleted, but this one, this is the same one. But anyway, I can do a GET, I can do a post, I can do a patch, I can update the NTP policies. This collection, the way it works, and this is the more important part, whether the operation works exactly as I expect to or not. The important part about this collection is it has in it a pre-request script. When you're working with Intersight, remember I said you have to sign the request. You do that in Postman by having a pre-request script. And that pre-request script takes that request, whether it's a get, a post, a patch, whatever it is, takes that request, takes the body of the request, and even if it's a get, it takes the empty body, creates a SHA-256 hash of that body, and then uses your key ID and your private key, or your RSA private key, to encrypt that or sign that request and send it along. And it does it for every request. So you have some Python, and bonus, you have some JavaScript here if you want to write JavaScript to interact with Intersight API. But with the Intersight API, you have to remember that you're signing the request before it's sent over to Intersight. So this library has this pre-request script in it, and it actually goes a little bit deeper into Postman than you may have actually experienced before. Postman, we show in the DevNet zone running just regular, very basic API calls. Those basic API calls just utilize one of these single functions like get or post and then click the send button. But there's so much more you can do. You can have these pre-request scripts. You can have post-request tests. This specific request, after it runs, I want you to parse out the object called NTP policy, and I want you to take its managed object ID and put it into my global environment. There's the managed object ID for that entity in my global environment. So now when I run the delete should pick up on that, put it as a variable into my URL. You can use Postman to write full-blown orchestration, deployment things. Postman has a lot of functionality beyond just what you're getting, from the initial tutorials that they show you. This Postman collection tries to make good use of all the capabilities that are out there in Postman. All right, what I got? A couple of minutes. Ansible. UCS Ansible and Intersight Ansible both have a limitation. The limitation is that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of objects in both those object models. And there's very few, less than 50 modules, perhaps, for UCS, and there's 3 for Intersight. And typically in Ansible, a module is connected to an object. Module, object, module, object. There's no way that we could write thousands and thousands and thousands of these object modules for Ansible. And Ansible said, don't generate modules. We don't want you to do it that way. So we did the second best thing we could. We created a module called UCS Managed Objects, and we created one called Intersight REST API. With those 2 modules, you can manage, update, delete, edit, whatever it is, all the UCS objects, and you do the same thing with all the Intersight objects. Ansible is also changing. Ansible used to be, you downloaded Ansible and you got all these modules. They all came as part of it. In future versions of Ansible, it may be starting with Ansible 3, all the vendor modules are going to be pulled out of Ansible. So what the vendors are doing, what we're doing for Intersight, what we're doing for UCS, is we're creating collections. So in the future, if you get a version, if Ansible doesn't come with UCS Manager or with Intersight, you'll have to do an Ansible Galaxy install, or Ansible Galaxy collection install Cisco UCS, Ansible Galaxy collection install Cisco.Intersight. What this does is it goes to the Cisco namespace and then it gets the group of modules for UCS or the group of modules for Intersight and makes them available in your Ansible environment. Now Ansible, see if I have some here. Ansible has a number of ways that you can interact. There are, who's using Ansible? Anybody? Okay. So Ansible, for UCS, we have a couple of modules. There's a UCS query module, so you can just pull back anything. Where's the rest of that class there? Okay. You can query anything within the UCS object model, and it will bring you back a JSON body. I actually, with that module, I wrote it so that it will convert the XML to JSON for you, and you can use that JSON body, get it back. I have a collection out on, I just want to show you this as I wrap it up. I have a collection out on developer.cisco.com. Well, actually, I'll show you on Moving a Lot. It's called Ansible Configurations. So if you go to Moving a Lot on GitHub and go to Ansible Configurations, I have in here Ansible for ACI, NXOS, and UCS. This UCS, you like my comment? Change stuff? It was more for a demo. I just had to have the comment go through. This repo is set up to create VLANs and associate the VLAN IDs to VNIC templates. This is a very standard methodology of working with Ansible with UCS. What I'm doing here, though, in this repo, if you get into it, I set it up. There's a webhook listener. I set it up so that when I post a change to GitHub, that change causes a webhook to send the payload of that change to this webhook listener. The webhook listener sees that a change has been sent to GitHub, downloads onto this Ansible or this machine running Ansible the repo that I've just updated, and then it cycles through ACI, NXOS, and UCS and enables those changes based on that webhook. But what's cool about that, in this last minute here, is I set up the code to talk to a WebEx Teams room called Cogsworth. Now, what Cogsworth gets is the output of the Ansible run. What's cool about this is that it shows whoever's in that room, other administrators, other developers, whoever might be interested in that equipment or that configuration, it shows who the committer was, John McDonough. The commit message was change stuff, and what I did, and the run of the Ansible run that happened. So it's not just ran on some server somewhere and someone's got to go look at the logs. This is in our DevNet automation exchange. It's one of the examples in there, but the code is at Moving a Lot Ansible-configurations. This is a way to work, very seamlessly or in a DevOps type of way, create the change in my VS Code editor, commit it to GitHub, and everything else just happens. The payload gets fired off in the webhook listener picks it up, the webhook listener then causes a script to run through those changes and affects those changes to ACI, NXOS, or UCS. So I definitely think it's worth looking at that code repo. I had so much information. I'm going to put these slides out there and definitely go through them. Only the one slide for DSC. The whole Postman Intersight flow that I have, I may have talked too much to get through them all. But if you have questions and you want to reach out to me, I'm on WebEx Teams. I tweet stuff, nothing political, and it's just tech stuff. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, anytime I write a blog or do something, it's up there. And I thank you for coming and paying attention. I appreciate it. Fill out the survey. If you liked what I did, that's great. Let me know. If you feel like it could have been different or better, let me know that too, and I'll change it up for the next time. Continue your education. Go to the DevNet Zone. Thanks for coming.